My name is Becca.
My name is Luke.
And we're here with the Leave No Trace organization. We're going to be leading the effective communication workshop of Leave No Trace, and we're hosted today by the National Wilderness Skills Institute with Angie. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to have an overview of what Leave No Trace is, as well as what outdoor ethics and outdoor impacts are. But really the meat of today, we're not going to be talking too much about like the 7 principles or teaching you so much about Leave No Trace. We're really going to spend our time, this is like level 2 sort of. So we're going to be spending our time talking about how to communicate Leave No Trace with your guests. And since we've got people calling in from all over the country, this should be a really interesting conversation. We're going to be using the authority of the resource communication technique. And we're also going to be looking at steps of the recreational experience. So as people are like heading towards us, kind of planning their trip, once they're on site, and even once we leave, how we can utilize these as times to educate them about Leave No Trace. We have some time at the end for resources and Q&A. If you have a question, we will be doing our best to keep an eye on the chat. So if you have a question that we can maybe answer organically, feel free to put it in the chat. If not, we'll definitely get to it at the end.
Cool.
So what Leave No Trace is, we're a nonprofit organization. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, and we teach all about outdoor ethics and outdoor impacts. So currently there are over 13 billion trips into the outdoors alone, in the US alone each year. And so with this many people getting outside, we really have to think about all of these cumulative impacts and how these things add up. And so, the goal of Leave No Trace is, like I mentioned, we're an educational nonprofit. And so there are lots of different ways that we can kind of get people to do what we want them to do in the outdoors. But we believe that education is one of the most effective ways for long-lasting change. And so we educate people. Want to talk how we reach people?
Yeah. So we are doing that education all over the country in all kinds of different ways through all sorts of different partnerships. Becca and I are a Subaru Leave No Trace traveling team. So we live out of a Subaru and travel full-time teaching about Leave No Trace at festivals. We work with land managers like our national parks and Bureau of Land Management people. We partner with all kinds of organizations, businesses, guides and outfitters, really anywhere where people are recreating outside, we are there teaching about Leave No Trace. And we do it virtually.
Ta-da! Yeah. 6 impacts.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about impacts, when we're thinking about the ways that humans can negatively affect the outdoors, it can be kind of a large topic, kind of hard to wrap our minds around completely. So this is how we break it down into these 6 categories. These are the main areas where we can do damage whenever we go outside. Just out of curiosity, I'd love to know maybe like what are the top impacts in your area? What do you all see most on a regular basis? You can feel free to drop that in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead and put that in the chat. I will help to jog your brain here. So some things that Leave No Trace addresses: lots of tree carvings, maybe feeding wildlife, whether that is intentionally, like in the picture, but also unintentionally. We talk a lot about damage to cultural heritage sites. So here is like carving on a cultural heritage site, but also maybe things like graffiti, the infamous dog poop bag. We do address, pet recreating with pets as well as pet waste, and even bagged left pet waste, iconic. And then also things like overcrowding. So when we have different user groups or even the same user group using the same area, sometimes it can start to feel really crowded. And so like the picture on the left here with the tubing, we might see maybe a lot of extra litter from this tubing festival, maybe where they're parking might be like damaged vegetation, but also even like overflowing porta potties and things like that. And then on the right, that is a picture from a very popular national park shuttle. And so people in the in the line maybe aren't too keen to be there, like to wait. So it can just kind of degrade the experience of being outside. We've got minimal trash in the water. That's good.
Yeah, nice.
Glad to hear that. Some user-made trails. Wild Alabama mentioned soil erosion, tree carvings, and damage to live trees. We'll definitely talk about that today. Human waste and pet waste. Vandalism at petroglyph sites. That is such a bummer.
Yeah.
That is really unfortunate. You can't pick that up or get that back. Someone here has a wilderness area that's 30 minutes away from 5 million people. Wow. I bet you see some interesting impacts. Campfire waste, campsites not cleaned up. Yeah. So this will be a really interesting conversation here because we just have so many different sites with different, opportunities for interesting recreation and just appreciating nature in different ways, as well as opportunities for impacts and how we can address them. Land use.
Yeah. So this graph is a breakdown of land management agencies and how much use they see. And the goal in showing you this is not so that you memorize these numbers or anything like that. I think these are from 2019, so they're pre-COVID. So it would likely be a lot more today, but it's just to get at kind of that cumulative impact idea. So a lot of things that we talk about at Leave No Trace may not seem like the biggest deal. Like it's, not the end of the world if someone tosses an apple core or, their dog goes to the bathroom or whatever. But when you start to see numbers like this, like 13 billion trips into the outdoors, like Becca mentioned earlier, this can really add up and contribute to ecosystem change. And things like city parks and local parks aren't even on this graph. So that would be, off the charts. So what we're thinking about here is not how we can get just a few people practicing Leave No Trace perfectly. We want to get as many people as possible doing it as imperfectly as they're willing and able to do, so that we can get those cumulative impacts for positive change, not just the negative side of things.
Which brings us to this idea of Leave No Trace as a spectrum.
Yeah. So, when we think about Leave No Trace and Leave No Trace behaviors, maybe I like to think of it as a spectrum. So on one side of the spectrum, we have really pristine areas, no trash, really doing well. On the other side of the area or spectrum, we have more damaged areas, more trash, all the impacts that you all mentioned earlier. And anytime that we go outside, we're falling somewhere along that spectrum. We're either contributing to one or the other or somewhere in the middle. And the goal of Leave No Trace is to provide education to meet people wherever they are on that spectrum, because we really do believe that everyone is entitled to spending time outside regardless of their Leave No Trace experience or knowledge. So we want everyone outside. We want to meet them where they are with education, so that ideally they will take as many steps as they're able or willing towards that more pristine side of the spectrum, so that we can have everyone doing this imperfectly and really get that cumulative impact for good.
And currently the relationship is that as we see more outdoor use kind of increase, we'll also see outdoor impacts increase. But the heart of Leave No Trace and what we're really trying to do here, and what we hope that you'll feel like you leave today with, is that we'll still be able to see that outdoor use increase. We want people to get outside. That is a good thing. We want people out enjoying our public lands, but we want them to be able to get outside more and to be educated about Leave No Trace and to decrease those impacts. So we want more people outside with less impacts, and it's possible. Which brings us to this idea that all of our Leave No Trace recommendations are based in science and data.
Yeah, we do a lot of research, current ongoing stuff with a lot of different universities, and we do most of our research in the areas of recreation ecology and the human dimension of natural resources. So if you're not familiar with those, recreation ecology is the study of actual landscapes and how they change as we recreate. So measuring really concrete things like campsite proliferation or erosion or human waste impacts, or those things that you can really quantify numerically. And then the human dimension of natural resources is more of the social science piece. So like how people interact with natural spaces, how they interact with each other, signage, kind of like more like psychology. And that's a little bit more where we will be focusing today, talking about communication. But we do a lot of work in both If you're interested in that, we have all that research on our website, both in like the actual academic paper form, as well as in kind of I don't know, like a layperson translation, if that's more your speed. But really interesting stuff. I'd recommend checking it out.
So all the science and data that Leave No Trace has done over the last 30 years has led us to the idea of these 7 principles of Leave No Trace.
And we call them principles for a reason. Like, we don't want people to think of them as like the 7 commandments of Leave No Trace, or like these 7 rules that you must do, or your, whatever. We really like to think of them as a tool for decision making based on scientific best practices. So all of our research has shown us that if we are following these principles, we are, most likely practicing sustainable recreation behavior. So they're not rules. They're not like things that we want to browbeat people with, but they're more like ways that if you are thinking through these 7 different categories, you can be sure that you are being sustainable. And we also really like to emphasize, like, I'm not really going to dive super deep into the 7 principles, individually during this workshop. If you're interested in that, we have an online course on our website. Or if you have a specific question, feel free to drop it in the chat or save it till the end.
I would love to know, how familiar are you with the 7 principles of Leave No Trace? Like, do you feel like you 100% know by heart all the 7 principles and how to practice them in your area? Do you feel like kind of 50-50? If we were in person, I'd ask you to give me like a thermometer here. But since you're not in person, do you want to give me like a percentage?
Yeah.
Or like I don't know.
Very familiar, heard of them, or
what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We've got a level 2 instructor for up to 10 years. Thumbs up. Just went through level 1 instructor training.
Awesome.
Yeah. We will keep explaining more about the principles while you go ahead and let us know. But this is very helpful for us as we kind of gear this workshop.
Yeah. But what we really want to emphasize is that these are not common sense. So I think in the past, there's been kind of this understanding of, well, like Leave No Trace is obvious, or these are obvious and people should be doing these, or they are stupid or don't know what they're doing. But we really want to get away from that mindset and really understand that maybe a lot of us have had the privilege of spending a ton of time outside and recreating and getting to do all the things that we love to do. But many people don't have that experience. Maybe they didn't grow up going outside. Maybe they just don't get to get out that often. So we really want to base all of our education on the understanding that these are learned behaviors. And we want to talk to people about them in that way, so that we're teaching them rather than expecting people to already know this stuff. Because at some point, we all learned this. We all learned how to recreate, how to be sustainable, how to leave no trace. So we want to be that resource for other people rather than, making them feel bad for not knowing something that, no one taught them.
And they're not stuck there just because they're maybe not the best at practicing Leave No Trace today. Doesn't mean that if they spend a ton of time out in nature this year, really fall in love with it, that, they don't start to appreciate it more and learn more about Leave No Trace. So that's kind of what today is all about.
Yeah.
We don't have time today to really dive into all of the 7 principles. We do like 5-day workshops on how to leave no trace. So we definitely, can't cover all of that today. Like Luke mentioned, we do have that free self-paced, about 45-minute online training course that you can take on our website if you really want to learn the ins and out of the 7 principles specifically. And then if you do have any questions, like a nagging, I've always kind of wondered this sort of thing, please feel free to put it in the chat either now, later, or when we do questions. It doesn't matter to us. And we will try to find a chance to answer that. But we're going to move on so that we're not just talking about the 7 principles, but that we get to teach you how to communicate them. Recreational experience.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about Leave No Trace, we spend a lot of time and effort thinking about reaching people when they are actually on-site recreating. And we're going to spend a lot of our workshop talking about that. But that's not the whole picture. So whenever we're thinking about recreation, we want to take this broader view, because we understand that the more times that people hear about Leave No Trace or best practices or your local rules and regulations, the more likely they are to actually practice it on site. So this recreational experience framework starts with the anticipation phase. So this is where people are doing their research about your site, about your wilderness, and thinking about what they want to do. They're planning their trip. So this is where it falls on y'all to understand how people are doing their research and what information is available online. Like, what are they going to find first? So this, are things like making sure your website is really top notch, making sure that you have Leave No Trace and your most important rules and regs really clear. What you really want people to know should be the first thing that pops up online. And also kind of the understanding that a lot of people are doing their research on social media. And whatever your thoughts or feelings are about social media, it is just kind of another fact.
Here to stay.
Yep, people are using it. They're going to keep using it. A lot of people are researching there more than like Google. Like it's sort of become a sort of search engine of sorts. And we really want, if you have the ability, I know that a lot of government agencies are kind of constrained with social media, but friends groups and things like that aren't, under the same limitations. So if you have the ability to be putting forward really accurate, detailed information on social media, that can be a big help. And we'll talk a little bit more about social media later. But right now I just want to point out that it's kind of your first touch point to communicating what you really want people to know before they get to your site. Then we have that second step of the recreational experience when people are traveling to your site. This is where things like gateway businesses really come into play. So all of the different organizations or businesses that kind of surround your site. So like thinking about, where do people go first? Like, what are, restaurants in the area or hotels or guides and outfitters? How can you be working with those businesses to have Leave No Trace available there, whether that's like on a coaster at a brewery, or guides and outfitters cover it before they go out, or things like that. But how can you be making that a part of the larger culture of your area as well as just at your site? Then, of course, you have when they're actually on site recreating, doing their thing. And we'll be talking more about that for the rest of the workshop after this. After that, you have kind of the opposite step where they're leaving. Maybe your site is part of a larger road trip or a circuit that people do. So understanding how you can fit into that and use Leave No Trace as the shared language across public lands, so that whenever people go wherever they're going, they will be still using that framework and familiar with it. And that last step is when they're sharing about their experience. So just making sure that Leave No Trace, your most important rules, were such a part of the experience that that's what people are going to talk about, like wherever they're sharing with that social media or just in person with their friends, that Leave No Trace is going to come up. Like it was just essential to their experience.
All right. Pop quiz. It's a hard one. Most people go outside to. Any guesses? Not all at once now. You're overwhelming the chat. Yeah. See. Woo. Yeah. To enjoy nature and be outdoors. And so something that we're going to be talking a lot about today is giving people the benefit of the doubt. We want to make Leave No Trace the easy thing to do. And communication research shows us that when people think that you are asking them to do something that is easy, and when you are asking them to do something that everyone else is also doing, that they're much more likely to do it. And so kind of keep those things in mind as we talk about these, how we are getting people to do what we want them to do.
Yeah, it's also really important to remember why people are coming out. Like, they're coming out to recreate, to have a good time, to relax. Maybe a lot of us are in sort of the land management business. So whenever we go outside, we're thinking more critically about the land and our relationship to it. But that just might not be the case for everyone, and that's okay. Like, that's, it's an understandable place to be. They just want to come out and have a good time. And so when we're talking to people, we really do want to emphasize that Leave No Trace is easy, that following the rules is easy, and that it's just part of the culture that everyone's doing, like Becca mentioned.
Yeah. There are a few different ways that we can influence people's behavior when we're with them. And so Leave No Trace focuses on education, but the other two do come into play, and so they are important to think about. So, we can educate people before they get there, once they're on site, so that they know how to practice Leave No Trace. But enforcement and engineering do come into play as well. So enforcement might be kind of like rules and regs, if there's a fine, um, park rangers roaming around, and then engineering is going to be things like maybe where we place trash cans, where we place signage, where do we put pit toilets so that we're not looking at those human waste impacts. So all of these things kind of come together to get people to practice Leave No Trace. Leave No Trace has found that in order to get people to practice Leave No Trace, even when nobody's watching, what we really need to influence long-term behavior change is to fill these two gaps in understanding. So the first gap is a basic understanding of the natural world around us. So kind of ecology of the area, which might seem basic, but when you're traveling, like I certainly am not an expert. We've got people calling from Arizona, people calling from the Pacific Northwest, people calling from DC. So no one can be an expert in all of these different areas. So, this is kind of an exciting opportunity for you to educate them. And then the second gap in understanding is an understanding of the consequences or impacts of our actions. And then we know that when people have these two gaps in understanding filled, they come together to be able to practice Leave No Trace and to understand like the why. So we really want them to be able to know why and how Leave No Trace is effective at minimizing impacts. That way they're more likely to do it long term. Which brings us to the idea of the why. So we're going to be talking a lot about the why today, but all of the rules and regulations that we have in place are there for a reason. They're not just kind of like arbitrarily sticking rules and regs on things. And so when we tell people why, we're kind of able to like enlist them as active participants in protecting nature, in practicing Leave No Trace. And that's what we're going to be talking about today as we share these communication techniques. And when we're giving people the why, it's most helpful to practice to focus on two pieces here. And so we really want to give people the social reasons of why we need to do whatever we're asking them to do, as well as the ecological reasons. And because this is going to help to kind of appeal to different like types of people and give them lots of different good reasons why. And so some people, they might feel like, I'm out in nature, I don't care about other people, like there's nobody around to give me a fine, I'm not really super concerned about the social aspects. Some people are seriously like, I hate people and I just love nature.
People tell us this all the time.
Yeah. They say, I hate people. They're not going to be super compelled by social reasons, right? Some people, maybe they just haven't spent a ton of time in nature. They feel like their impacts are not really a big deal. They don't understand cumulative impacts. But they would feel super embarrassed if somebody saw them do something that is less than Leave No Trace. And so those people might have more like a social spin to it. And so when we give people the social and the ecological reasons behind the why of what we're asking them to do, they're much more likely to practice Leave No Trace. So for example, here with dog waste, which is a super common impact that I feel like most of you.
This one seems universal.
Yeah. We know dog waste pollutes water sources, it spreads disease to wildlife, and it also creates a less desirable space for other people. So we're filling them in on the social reasons as well as those ecological reasons. Which brings us to these two types of communication techniques.
Yeah. So now we're kind of thinking about the actual interaction where you see someone who is doing something that is less than Leave No Trace and you want to talk to them about it. So we have two different styles of communication. We have authority of the agency and authority of the resource. But before we dive into those, I'd love to hear what emotions or what connotations do y'all have with the word authority? When you hear the word authority, what comes into your mind? Please drop that in the chat.
I say authority. You say... Let's see. Someone said the man, capital T, capital M.
The man.
Someone said ick, stern, scary, the government, power. Don't you all work for the government?
I like ick. That one's funny to me.
Yeah. Yuck. Risa asked, what am I supposed to do? You are supposed to let us know what
connotations do you have with the word authority? When we say authority, what comes to mind for you? Like what kinds of associations? Maybe their emotions, maybe their ideas.
Someone said feds. We've got immediate opposition. Immediate opposition. Like power. Daniel. Enforcement demands rules, resisting. Yeah.
Man, power to the people. Y'all have, this is funny.
Sometimes we do this and people are like,
order, law,
like
structure.
peace,
like, I don't know.
Protection.
But it is interesting that all of these are pretty negative, frankly. Like I don't, none of these are really like super lovey-dovey.
Some seem neutral at best.
Yeah, neutral at best. Associations with authority. And that's probably the case for many people who are recreating in your areas. Like maybe some people have good experiences and, love the, whatever the rules and regs and all that. Many people probably do not and probably have not had amazing experiences with authority. So before we even think about communicating with people about, their behavior, we need to understand that people are going to see you as an authority figure. And they're probably going to bring all of their previous connotations and associations about authority into that interaction. Like if you have some sort of badge or a hat or a, whatever, something that shows like, hey, I am officially related to this land, they will, people will very likely see you as an authority figure first.
Let us know in the chat. Can any of you write tickets?
Yeah.
Are any of you actually ticket writers? Maybe you can write tickets, maybe you can't, but maybe you look like someone who could write a ticket.
You got a pen in your front pocket.
If you have a front pocket.
Yeah, totally.
With like a logo on it.
I never know the difference. Like this is why we ask this question in all of our workshops, because we'll show up and we got a group full of rangers and it's like, which one of you can write tickets here?
Yeah, we have, it seems like so far it's like half yeses, half no's, some ticket writers.
I can almost guarantee you the general public will not know the difference. So that's something that's, that enforcement piece is going to be in people's minds whenever we start to talk to them.
So you start walking up and they see capital authority. T, capital M, the man.
They see the man coming up with his ticket writing pen. So we want to think about our communication style very carefully. So our first option is authority of the agency. This is where you really lean into that rules and regs piece. You get your authority, your ability to talk to them about their behavior from the human-created system, from the BLM or the Forest Service or the National Park Service or whoever it is that manages your particular area. You can say, I stop doing that behavior because it is against the rules. You'll get a fine, you'll get a ticket, it's not allowed. Kind of that very human-created systems piece of enforcement. And this method is not effective at long-term behavior change. You might get short-term compliance, like while you're there, they might continue, do whatever you want them to do. But a lot of y'all manage really big wildernesses, and there's millions of acres and 2 rangers or something like that. So it's unlikely that you'll be able to be there the whole time to monitor them to make sure they're compliant. So they will likely continue to do whatever they want to do after you leave. So we want to be using something a little bit different. We want to be using what's called the authority of the resource technique. In this style, you're getting your right to talk to them about their behavior from the idea that some things contribute to health in the natural world. Some things contribute to flourishing and the ecosystem functioning properly, and others don't. And that in and of itself kind of creates some authority. Like we want to be doing things that work and not doing things that harm. And this is where your role shifts from an enforcer to an educator. You're helping people to realize what those things are that work and what things don't work, what things hurt. So it really shifts it from that human piece to that ecology piece. And I think that we have a video to demonstrate this.
Excuse me.
Oh, hello.
Hi. Yeah, you can't have your dogs here.
I mean, they're being good and fine.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's a regulation here. Dogs aren't allowed. There was a sign when you walked in. Yeah, so dogs aren't allowed on this trail.
It's really not a big deal. It's fine. Do it all the time.
Yeah, I understand, but I have to enforce the rules for everyone, and I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. I'll just give you a warning this time, but if I see you again, I will have to give you a ticket.
Ticket's not cool. I can't afford a ticket.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I'm sorry.
Whatever.
Like I said, dogs aren't allowed here. Hi, how's it going today?
Good. It's going really well.
Is this your first time coming out to this trail?
Yeah, actually, I just moved here, and this is our first time checking out the area. It's
Wow.
beautiful.
Have you been able to see any wildlife while you've been out?
I haven't, but we really haven't been looking for them either.
Yeah. I've noticed a few dogs on the trail today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you know this, but this area is actually the lambing grounds for bighorn sheep. This is where they raise their young.
Okay.
So dogs can actually have a pretty big impact on that. Because of that, we actually don't allow dogs on this trail to help us kind of protect the bighorn sheep.
I mean, even if they're on a leash and close to me?
Yeah, even if they're on a leash, just the smell of them can still have an effect, and it can be very damaging to the bighorn sheep. So I know some areas around here where the wildlife isn't a concern and you can have your dogs off leash if you'd like me to kind of point you in that direction.
Yeah, that'd be great. I had no idea about the sheep.
Yeah, I really appreciate you doing your part to help protect them. They're a very special animal, and it helps keep this place wonderful for them to live in and for us to keep enjoying. So thank you for doing your part.
Of course. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There is a strategy to it. So it's not just like, there is a framework that you can follow if this style of communication is unfamiliar to you. So first of all, you're going to want to build rapport. And this is really, really important because of what we mentioned before about people seeing you as an authority figure first. This is where you get to demonstrate, I'm a person, you're a person. We can just have a conversation here. This doesn't have to be confrontational. Ask them about what they're doing. If it's their first time, show them that you are actually willing to have a conversation with them. And this does take a little bit more time. Like this whole style of communication takes slightly more time than a more authority, the agency piece, but it really is worth it to get that long-term behavior change. And it can be tough if you're talking to hundreds of people a day and you see the same impacts all over and over again, but it really is worth it to go that extra mile and go for that more human interaction to get that long-term behavior change. So you build your rapport, you demonstrate that you're kind, that you want to talk to them in a friendly way. And then you have 3 steps that you're going to follow to have this authority of the resource interaction. So first, you're going to make an objective statement about the impact. Second, you're going to talk about the consequences. Third, you're going to give alternatives. So we'll kind of get into those each more in detail. So first is that objective statement piece. This is super important, that word objective. So we're not going to be coming in really angry or like, I can't believe you're doing this, or why do you have your dog here? We're more of that like emotional piece. We really want to come in super level, super factual. You can even go above and beyond to make people not feel singled out. Like if you see someone with their dog off a leash and they're not allowed to be off a leash, you can say, hey, I've noticed a couple dogs off leash today. Even if you haven't noticed a bunch of dogs off leash that day, I'm sure you have before. But whatever you can do to make people feel comfortable, even you can stretch the truth a little bit on that particular instance, but we just don't want people to feel defensive or to feel stupid. Like we don't want people to get argumentative. So whatever you can do to set people at ease and be really factual about what you're wanting to talk about, like what behavior it is that you want to talk to them about. Then you're going to get to that consequences piece. This is where you're giving them the why. You're filling those gaps in understanding, those about the way that the ecosystem works and the consequences of their actions. So this is the meat of it, the education piece. You give them those social reasons, those ecological reasons, like Becca mentioned. And finally, you're going to provide alternatives. So this is where the responsibility really falls on y'all to think through your main impacts. Like, what do you see people do the most? And how can you provide some sort of alternative, because people really don't like to be just presented with a problem. It can kind of ease the whole interaction if you also have a solution. So maybe if dogs aren't allowed in your area, I know a lot of y'all do wilderness stuff, so maybe they're like biking and wheels aren't allowed, but have some alternatives, maybe some like other places where they can go close by to do whatever it is they're doing. If this, you really do need to think through this beforehand, have those alternatives ready, ready to go. You want to talk when to address it?
Yeah. So it used to be an old recommendation that Leave No Trace would recommend that people go ahead and, like, if you see someone, like they used to say, even see something, say something. That's no longer a recommendation that we have. It led to people feeling very like policed in the outdoors, and it never led to effective long-term change. Like, it didn't work.
People just they don't really receive this well from peers, frankly.
Yeah. And so we really would recommend addressing less than Leave No Trace behavior when you have that official hat, badge, fancy polo shirt, when it looks like you are someone who is able to, have an official formal connection with the land, even as a volunteer, that says, like, I can talk to you about your behavior. So this is really best used in an official capacity. If you're not in an official capacity, we would recommend focusing on your sphere of influencing and your sphere of influence and modeling behavior. So if you're out with your family and friends and you see somebody leaving their dog poop, then don't right in front of the person say something, but like as you're walking with your family, you can say, yeah, this could pollute the water source that we're walking next to. That's really not great. You can also we talk to our parents and our, siblings and friends about their Leave No Trace behavior. And it's okay because they know that we're out there to have fun together and they know that they're not being policed by us. So just maybe focusing on people that you're close to, and then modeling in other situations. So all the time, if we see trash out on the trail, we'll stop and pick it up and we'll put it in our backpack. And then we hear people all the time say something like, hey man, we should do a trash pickup around here sometime. Like, people do notice when you are out in nature and you kind of take that extra step. And so that's a great way to kind of show, don't tell. The ultimate goal of teaching Leave No Trace and using the authority of the resource technique to teach Leave No Trace is for long-term change and self-motivation. And so again, looking for ways that people can feel like they are part of this and, doing something about it. There are definitely times where this won't work though. So most people are out in nature because they love nature and they want to take care of it. But some people are not very nice. And some people don't care to do the right thing. They don't want to do right by other people. Maybe they don't even like themselves. And so they're not going to be super receptive towards Leave No Trace education or following the rules and regs. And so there are times when you can be the friendliest person in the world. You can give them that good educational interaction and it's still not going to work. And so in a situation like this, definitely, give them a ticket.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. You can go through the whole authority of the resource technique, and if they're like, oh, that's interesting or whatever, but I don't really care. You can switch to that enforcement piece. Even if you can't write tickets, you can invent a ticket writing ranger who is very close by. But you can switch to that rules and regs piece. This is also against the rules, and you could get a fine or a ticket or whatever it is that is part of that human created system. We just don't want to start there. We don't want to lead with enforcement because, like Becca mentioned, we're after long-term behavior change. And if people feel like they've learned something, like they're a better steward, they're much more likely to actually practice that behavior without even having to kind of resort to enforcement.
And I would love to know in the chat, you can go ahead and tell me who here writes signs. Does anybody here today work with written communication, whether that is at a visitor center or long-term posted signs. Do we have any sign writers in the audience? Yes, we do. Great. Love that. So we can focus, like we have the authority of the agency and the authority of the resource, and those things can apply to signage and written communication as well. And so signs are really important because this is what happens when nobody's there to enforce those rules and regs. And we do know that an interaction with a uniformed employee or volunteer is the most effective, but signs are very important as well. And so, and I know that sometimes, we might be in a wilderness area where we're not going to have signs all over the place. There are still signs like
at the entrance.
Yeah.
And this is where, things like trail ambassadors and things like that are really, really effective, especially in wildernesses where there's a bit more constraint with signage. Getting as many actual human beings as possible into that wilderness area who can provide that education. But there are still some very real circumstances, even in a wilderness, where a physical sign is the way to go.
Yeah. So hear us out, wilderness people. But signs can have the authority of the agency, or they can communicate using the authority of the resource. And so this is an example of a sign that another Subaru Leave No Trace traveling team did take a picture of. It's illegal to swim or wade in the Potomac River. Violators may be fined more than $200. And the reason that this sign was posted, it was posted that year, was because there was a really dangerous current and multiple people had drowned that summer alone. And so that's a really compelling reason why somebody might not want to swim there. It doesn't necessarily say that in the sign. So maybe it's like really hot out. This person, somebody saw the sign at the trailhead and they've already got their kids in their swimsuit. They swim there all the time. They've swum there for many years. It's really hot. They have $200. Like, they're not going to be stuck in a jam if they do get caught, but also nobody's around. Like, there are lots of reasons why somebody could kind of like rationalize
ignoring that.
Yeah. Maybe just accidentally not seeing. That kind of thing happens a lot. Which is why we really want to have good signage. And so this is, again, going to transfer that, like, because I said so, because you'll get a fine, onto more of the, like, ecological and social reasons. So, for example, close up of this sign. This is a real sign from the National Park Service. But why aren't dogs allowed? To protect the native and rare plants, ecological reason. To let other visitors feel safe, social reason. To avoid getting a fine, again, not mutually exclusive. But also what is very compelling to dog owners is that they love their dogs. And so if we can keep their dogs safe from rabies, snake bites, and ticks with Lyme disease in the area, that's a really compelling reason for people. It also is going to keep, their wildlife safe. Maybe there are little rodents or critters there that people would, sometimes dogs might like to get. So this isn't a perfect sign. It's a little bit wordy for sure, but it does do a good job of addressing those social and ecological reasons and giving people the why using the authority of the resource. Another question that we get asked a lot is it okay to have a big like circle with an X through it? Yes, we like pictures. Pictures are great. We want to keep our signage at about a 7th grade reading level, with only just the most important things that we really would like to highlight to be featured there. So, good sign here.
Yeah.
Some communication research. Leave No Trace has also found that information near potentially problematic areas has been most effective. And so if you're in a wilderness area, you might need to think kind of creatively here. Like maybe you do have one of those trail stewards or something in the back. But for example, if there is a social trail, Leave No Trace has found that posting a sign there, as well as a physical barrier, that's going to be most effective at getting people to stop. Like we want them to be able to see that sign and feel like they would have to step over it or like step around it or like hoist their leg up to get over a boulder or something like that. If they were going to go there, like we don't want someone to accidentally not see it.
Yeah, we want to kind of remove that deniability piece. Like the other day we were camping and there was a burn ban, and inside of our little fire ring there was a little red flag that said burn ban, no fires. And so in order to have a fire, we would have had to actually take that little sign out and then have our fire. So it just really eliminated that piece where we could say, oh, I didn't see the sign, or I didn't know. Like, removing deniability is helpful.
Yeah. Kind of like whenever there are burn bans and they have signs on the highway, that's good. We are getting people before they get there. Maybe they're not going to buy their wood. They're not going to buy their marshmallows. They're going to have a backup plan to cook their hot dogs. But we still want them to be able to not say like, oh, I didn't see that 6 giant signs on the highway that I passed that says that there's a burn ban. Leave no trace. Like I mentioned earlier, Leave no trace has also found that personal contact, so whether that's from an employee or a volunteer or someone at the visitor center, or maybe like Luke and I, a big part of our job is sitting at trailheads with our Leave no trace booth. So maybe you also have a job like that. That has been proven to be much more effective, more than signage, more than like telling people, rules and regs. But if you can get an actual person there, and I know that that's hard for a lot of you, but if you can, that is a great way to minimize impacts. As promised, we do want to talk about some social media guidelines. Would you let me know in the chat, please? Go ahead and warm up your fingers. How many of you do use social media in an official capacity at your job? And you can also let me know like how it's going. So I don't know if you maybe like have control of the official account, or maybe you work with a friends group and you can ask them to put. Yeah, people do. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
To promote wilderness and trails messages. Nice. So a couple kind of leave no trace tips and things that we have found from research, with leave no trace, is that we want to post pictures and reels or whatever of people practicing leave no trace. So sometimes, especially like outdoor brands are especially guilty of posting a picture maybe of like a truck with a rooftop tent parked in a field of wildflowers next to a stream. And this is not really something that we want to do, because even though it might be very aesthetic and beautiful, it's not a leave no trace behavior. So we don't want people to think that's something that they would be able to do. They would trample the vegetation, could pollute the water source if they're camping right next to a stream. So you really want to think about what your images are portraying. And then you can also encourage and inspire leave no trace in your posts with the caption. We would also encourage maybe acknowledging what native land you're on. It's a nice practice that we do. You can check out the social media accounts for Leave No Trace if you'd like to see an example of that. Leave No Trace is not anti-geotagging. So not anti, right? It's kind of
some legalese there.
A little wordy.
Yeah.
Are you all familiar with the hot debate of geotagging?
But especially in the wildernesses.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Luke answered for you. I bet you are. Geotagging especially became a problem during the pandemic, when a lot of agencies were shut down and you have a lot of influencers and people spending even more time on social media. And people will go out and post the exact coordinates of this beautiful, maybe iconic view, or, amazing spot to take a photo, and they'll post the exact coordinates. And if you post it to, some influencers have 1 million, literally 1 million followers. So if you post it to that, numbers like that, you do see a huge spike in use that maybe the land manager was not prepared for. And so this can be a problem with overcrowding, but the reality is that these are public lands. And so everyone is, they are entitled to be able to go out and enjoy those public lands. And so we would encourage kind of mindful geotagging. And so or you maybe as a land manager can also encourage people to visit nearby areas that aren't as crowded. You can also put in your posts that you might recommend people visit on a weekday if they're able to, or maybe don't visit on the holiday season, or maybe brace people for more crowds. I think especially in wilderness areas, people are getting out there for some solitude, and they get kind of annoyed when there are other people out there, which is funny because they are then
part of the crowd.
Yeah. They're part of the crowd too. And so this is kind of, Leave No Trace, our geotagging messaging is just that we're not against it. People are allowed to be out there, except in areas where there are maybe like cultural or heritage sites.
Yeah, if there are places that have non-public sites on public land, like places that are culturally significant that have not been designated, and that's there is an official designation of public archaeological sites versus non-public, and so if people are taking photos or tagging the locations of non-public sites, that is your only area where that is actually illegal and people are not allowed to be doing that. So that's like the only case where you can actually deny someone or say that they cannot geotag. But any other time, that's perfectly within their rights. We don't want to be telling people what they can and can't do. We want to be helping them to use public lands in a way that's sustainable. So just helping people to realize that if you geotag this space, it might attract more attention. Maybe this area can't handle that. Maybe we want to be directing people to these other areas. So just providing education rather than telling people not to do that.
You can also get out in front of it. So maybe if you have a bunch of people like crowdsourcing information, maybe on like Google Maps or All Trails or even like Instagram or something like that, saying like, this is an amazing trail and it's not actually a legal trail at all. You could, post your own stuff about all these other amazing trails, like have people review excellent trails that you do want them to go to kind of divert that attention.
It's always easier to put out accurate information than to stamp out inaccurate information. So making sure that on whatever platform, whether that's All Trails or Instagram or any of those, you are providing the most up-to-date, accurate information possible, and not spending all of your time trying to get All Trails to delete one trail that's not actually a trail. Have someone review it and say this is not a trail or whatever, but realize that might not be the best use of time. It's much more effective to be putting out correct information.
They also know that shaming is not the answer. And so a lot of times people will tag us on like the social media accounts as though they'll see somebody doing something that is less than Leave No Trace. Maybe like recently somebody tagged Leave No Trace in like an arrowhead hunting thing. It wasn't permitted there. It's not a Leave No Trace behavior. We do want to leave what we find. But just getting on and like commenting mean things on somebody's account is going to make them defensive. You're not going to be able to use the authority of the resource technique effectively. They don't know that you're officially connected to the land.
No one's mind is changed in the comments.
It just makes people really defensive. And they've done studies about this. Like it does just make people very defensive. So shaming is not something that we want to do. Again, just putting out, the information that you do want people to see. And then also thinking about how you can get back to places that you love. So maybe encouraging people to volunteer with a local friends organization, or even just encouraging things like brushing off your boots if you go to a certain area, if that's something that they do there. Like having like little bits of educational information can be very helpful and important as well. We have some time here for questions. I'm going to go over some resources that we have as well while you think of and put your questions in the chat. So anything that you would like for us to elaborate more on, or if you have a question about like a Leave No Trace practice specifically, or maybe a recommendation or signage.
Anything at all.
Yeah. Communication practice. Step right up. Don't be shy. But we're going to go over some resources while you do that. So you've heard us mention multiple times today about the Leave No Trace website. And I realize that we might be a little bit biased, but it's actually a treasure trove of information. We have things on there like free lesson plans that are like Common Core standard aligned, have things even like printable cards and like anything that would go with it. We have a bunch of free lesson plans on there that you can use. We do have that free online training course, which a lot of people have been using to train seasonal employees. And so if some of you are maybe in that position, you might want to consider how you could use the free 45-minute online training course.
Volunteer staff or things like that.
to get them familiar with Leave No Trace. And it goes well into the 7 principles, much deeper than we did today. So if you're one of those 75 percenters that we asked earlier, you could check that out as well. And you do get a little certificate that comes with it. We've seen some places, like certain guides and outfitters will give like a small discount if you present that certificate, which can be kind of nice. So I don't know, think about how you can get creative with that. We also have our blog on there, which has a bunch of just any sort of Leave No Trace blog topic that you can think of. We have our research and our resources. There's a way that you can request a visit from Leave No Trace traveling teams or nominate yourself to be a Leave No Trace spotlight or hotspot. We do things like signage consulting. So I would just really recommend checking out the website. We also have all of our social media channels there. You can watch Luke and I try to make TikToks if you'd like. You can also find the Leave No Trace YouTube. Well, yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. But the Leave No Trace YouTube has a bunch of really good short kind of skill set videos. And so, there's even a how to effectively communicate Leave No Trace video on there. Things that talk about teaching methods, learning styles, as well as how to poop, how to pee, how to prepare for a rafting trip, things like that. All kinds of videos. The YouTube channel is going to be kind of where that evergreen content lives. I mentioned earlier that this is an example of one of the lesson plans that we have on the Leave No Trace website with really good details like discussion questions, how to use it. So I know there are a lot of areas where they might send a ranger into a classroom to teach about a certain topic, maybe twice a year. So if you are one of those people and you don't know what to do, you should check out the Leave No Trace.
Or if you ever lead any kind of programming or guided hike or anything like that, we have tons of games, really easy stuff that is low prep that is already laid out on our website. So if you ever find yourself in the position where you're leading programming of any kind, we have probably got a game that would fit in perfectly.
We also have on the website, you can sign up to receive our newsletters. We have the Outsider, which is just general Leave No Trace information. It's free. It goes out, I think, every other week. They don't blow anything up. It's usually quizzes and stuff like that. And then we also have the Youth Educator newsletter that goes out quarterly. That can be a really great resource for youth educators as well. We are a nonprofit organization. We do get a lot of individual members that do support the organization, which we're really grateful for. Our position specifically as a Subaru Leave No Trace traveling team is funded mostly by these wonderful corporations, and we're really grateful for that. I want to put our email up here because if you have any questions or if you would like a resource or something from today, then you should be able to email us. We'd love to hear from people about, things that worked or maybe things that didn't, any little questions that you might have in the future. I do see we have a question in the chat from Risa. What are the most common reasons for teams to be unsuccessful shifting behavior with their visitors, even if they think they are doing all they can / what you've taught them?
That's a good question. I think that sometimes that can have maybe to do with engineering. So I think a lot of times when you just have an impact that just keeps happening over and over and over and over again, maybe that solution is not an education solution or an enforcement solution. Maybe there needs to be some sort of engineering change to actually preclude that impact from happening. So if maybe, I don't know, people are always tossing trash in the same spot, or always cutting this trail in this one way or this one area, really looking bigger picture at maybe this is just the easy thing to do that people seem to always be doing. Maybe that can be an engineering issue.
Yeah. If you'd like to share, Risa, I would be curious to know kind of what impact you're thinking of specifically that maybe you don't think that this communication technique would work with. We also do more in-depth consulting. So it's not Luke and I are just kind of the educators at Leave No Trace, but we do have a upper level
PhD.
Yeah, big wigs jinx.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time together. But there are some people at the organization who can look really critically at things that aren't working to help you figure out like advanced kind of like what else can we do besides just educating our staff. And so I would encourage you to maybe look into that as well.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to both of you again. Thank you so much, Becca and Luke. This is really interesting. And as someone who's been following Leave No Trace and doing trainings over the years, I think it's really interesting to see how the research that's being done really leads to some changes in our actions or like how you teach about it, like for a couple of examples, you would say like, oh, we used to say this and now we found that it's not the most effective way. So I think that's really cool. And I encourage everyone out there who's practicing Leave No Trace, but also like educating others about Leave No Trace to check back frequently and stay involved, like Becca and Luke mentioned, because there are always really interesting updates taking place.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah.